Hello, hello, and good afternoon, or good morning, because this time we have a special Poznań Magento Meetup. Streamed, so we are very international today, and we are very international because of our special guest, Ivan, who is running a training in Poznań, so it was a very unique opportunity to have him here and present some of performance magic live at this meetup. After Ivan, we are starting a little bit later than usually. So after the first presentation, we will have a break for some pizza and beer from Centuria. So thank you a lot for your support. And right after the break, we will follow with Kamil and Bartek and their presentations. All presentations today are in English, so hopefully you like it. For all our international guests, if you would like to ask questions or join this event virtually, please follow the link to Discord room. It's in the event description. I will be watching this room, so if you want to ask a question, just do it there, and I will repeat the question to our speakers. Okay, so thanks again to Centuria and Hyvä for supporting our meetup. Thanks, of course, to my Snowdog team, who is involved in organizing all that stuff here. Last event in this year, but also our last event in this space. So we have to say goodbye. It was a pretty nice office, but unfortunately after pandemic, it was empty way too long. And running event once a month is not enough to keep this space. So for New Year, we will be looking for a new location. But that's something we will start planning in the next year. Okay, so thank you for coming, and Ivan, it's your time now.
Thank you. So Kuba decided, okay, let's make some impromptu meetup this time while I'm doing training. So we had very last moment some merchant data to be shown in New Relic, because I want to show you some live demo with data today, so you would be able to see how actually the materials that I present to you is actually applied in a real merchant environment. So how many of you use New Relic on production for your merchants? So half the people, okay, so you would probably learn something new, and who doesn't use New Relic, you will learn also something interesting for yourself, and maybe you will decide to do it, because with one user, it's always free until you hit a limit with number of data ingestion, but it's very generous, like 100 gigs. So the title of the topic is New Relic Magic, and mostly the magic is because there is a lot of nice things available that you can magically use. Yeah, so first of all, I need to start my clicker. Okay, so about me, I don't know how many people know who I am, but I'm passionate about open source projects, and I really like contribute to stuff, so that's why I'm very passionate about Mage-OS and Magento Open Source. I'm an expert in optimizing web applications. I do this for a living. I have a lot of different merchants who ask me for advice. I'm one of grandparents of Magento, so I was in a team of first 5 core developers back in 2007 in Kyiv, Ukraine. I'm experienced in putting out fires on production when something goes wrong, especially when the website goes down and too much traffic and so on. So I really like those problems, and I really kind of a firefighter in that sense. So what are benefits of New Relic for merchants and for development agencies? First of all, like, you can measure the performance of your production environment. It's a good way to have some insight how your application performs. Out of the box, it actually supports Magento, That's quite cool. So you don't have to change much in the code. Like Magento comes with New Relic module out of the box in the core. There is some amazing set of tools to find bottlenecks. However, there is also some drawbacks of using New Relic. One of the things, it's actually very limited in finding in-depth traces. So if you really want to find exact line of code that slows down your application, it's very hard to do with New Relic. Like it can give you information about some symptoms, about general area where things are happening and where things are going wrong. And then you can go on from there and use some other profiling tools to find stuff. Also, another issue, it's very expensive for larger projects. As soon as you have like multiple developers who needs to have a full access to New Relic, it's crazy expensive. And when you have a lot of data coming in as well. So not a lot of merchants decide to have New Relic available for projects, but it's kind of very nice and great tool. Also, what I find quite interesting, it's very easy to configure browser agent of New Relic to break your front-end performance. Because sometimes it connects to New Relic server, but you can choose embedding mode of browser agent, and then you don't need to download the stuff from their servers, so you can have good monitoring. But a lot of people are using nowadays RAM Vision or let's say Cloudflare Web Analytics that also provides the same data into the front-end performance. So New Relic not always is the best choice for that area, but it's very good for backend performance. And today we'll learn a little bit about some stuff. So let's do some live demo. I'll try to do it with one hand not available, so sorry for that. So here we have a New Relic account of DME customer, one of the customers of Snowdog. What's very important for me to always look for is top transactions. First of all, I start with the default view. So in default view, like when you go to APM services transactions, you would see the most time consuming. And here, for instance, right away, I can see like for the last 30 minutes, there was some slow transactions in REST API. It looks like checkout one. So let's click on this one. Let's see what kind of a problem there. Okay, so we see that there is slow FedEx API. There is another shipping API that might be causing some slowdown. Let's take a look at this trace. So what's nice that it can give you some information, and you can take a look at the slow trace that it recorded. Then you can go inside of it. You can see, okay, it's a very common Magento problem. Actually, recently I had the same issue on one of another customer projects where a lot of sessions were locking each other because it was trying to read the data from session storage and then write to the storage, and because of that, the Redis session actually starts with some exclusive lock for each of the connections. So if you have too many HTTP connections, you will run into this case per each customer. So that's why it's slow. So it's like 21 seconds was spent on waiting. How usually you solve this problem? Recently, actually, it was very interesting solution for one of the merchants I did. We did read-only sessions on specific routes. And this specific route, we can see its totals calculations. During totals calculations, there is no writes to session happening because the cart is still going to be there. Everything else is still going to be there, so there is no writes expected. So you can start a Redis session with read-only mode, and then it won't lock on those API calls. Okay, we found some issue, but from here, here we were lucky because we saw right away what is the longest call, but sometimes it is not how the things go. So let's take a look now to another traces. Here we can take a look, for instance, into the category view. I did take a quick look, just a couple of seconds today, and it was an interesting case where we see, let's say, 600 milliseconds. Like, it's not that slow trace, but what was interesting for me that I didn't expect is there's absolutely no valuable information for me here. Like, okay, render non-cached element. Okay, it takes 600 milliseconds, but what is that non-cached element? So then this is the case where you go from the trace locally to start profiler and work with the profiler. But okay, traces are quite neat feature, but not always helpful. Another important thing that I always look for, apart from most time consuming, is highest throughput. So I also want to make sure that when something happens on production, you don't do too much calls to the backend, so you have like proper caching set up and so on. And here it's very interesting, right away what comes to my mind is that customer account create is called like 11 times within the last 30 minutes. So looks like this customer has so many customers, or there is something weird happening in production. I don't know. It makes sense to investigate. So let's take a look, let's say through the span of the last 6 hours. And we definitely see there is a lot of customer accounts created. So maybe Snowdog, you need to take a look into this problem. Looks very suspicious. Then another one, I don't know what kind of transaction it is. And here is actually where New Relic QL can be very helpful, because here you don't see at all what is going on there, right? So you only see, okay, there is action unknown, other transactions, action unknown. So let's take a look with New Relic QL what it is. So first of all, I'm going to copy the name of the transaction that is unknown, because I will use it later. And I'm going to go into query your data view, and I'm going to select, so first of all, in New Relic you can specify from before select. This is kind of weird and weirds me out as a person that is used to SQL-based databases. So you can select from transaction, and from transaction you can specify select of request URI. Request URI. And here you can specify where condition as well. And this is going to be name. So the name which we copied, so let's paste it here. And let's see what kind of data we're going to receive here. Okay, the URI is empty. So this is a very weird situation. So what happens there? Why there is those calls? Let's navigate more. Let's take a look maybe at transaction type. Is it a web transaction, or maybe it's something different? So it's other transaction time. So it's probably, could be possible it's maybe some kind of consumer running, but it doesn't report the consumer name. Okay, case closed. Nothing that much interesting. Okay, let's take a look at some other cool features of New Relic that are available. And one of the most important one is custom dashboards. I really like to use it for merchants to show what actually happens with their website from performance perspective. So first of all, before we are going to create the custom dashboard graphs itself, first of all, we need to start to understand what we're going to use. We are going to use New Relic QL. They abbreviated as NRQL. What's cool about it, apart from these APM transaction traces, with query language and custom dashboards, you can overlay different metrics together. So you can see if my backend has been responding unexpectedly, you can correlate it with, let's say, LCP metrics or other metrics inside of New Relic. Another thing, you can monitor key performance metric of your web application over time. And we will have some of them later in the slides. Also, you can show how cool you are to your merchant, because you know how to build those nice dashboards. So let's build a custom dashboard for this customer. First of all, we're going to start with available applications, because sometimes you have staging, you have production, so you want to see a specific view into specific application. So we have this New Relic QL for transactions. So let's switch here and let's go to dashboards. Inside of dashboards, let's create a new one. We'll call it performance. Oh, okay, caps lock. We're gonna click edit button, and here we are gonna add a new variable. Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, first of all, let's click done editing, click on add. Oh, where's the add button? Okay. Yeah. Let's find it together. So let's go maybe to the settings. Maybe in settings I can add a new variable. Not here. So, okay, cool. Let's click here. Not happening here. Edit. Okay. Maybe add a widget. No, also not a widget. Metadata is not the case. Because before, like, here was a bar that you could just add a new variable. Okay, so let's just create for now something like that. Let's click run. So we'll see, okay, we have only one application with transaction itself. So let's add it here as a tab. Now it's there. Okay, so here is a trick for you. Now we can add a new variable, and we can set the default value to the ones that they have in production. Let's specify the name. I call it app, usually, and here we will call it application. So let's save it. Okay, the variable is there. Now we can actually delete this one because we don't need it anymore. Okay, that's very interesting way to deal with things. Let's hope the variable is still there. So let's add a widget, let's add a chart, and let's add the next chart that we're gonna use here. We're gonna use here now facets filter based by page type. So here I'm using facet cases. It's like a special operator in New Relic QL that allows you to create facets based on conditions. And here I have a lot of conditions based on URI and based on transaction name. So I can find checkout page, I can find home page, I can find cart, search, login, account, success page, and a bunch of other pages. And the last two ones are actually named transactions of category view and product view. So let's copy this transaction. And what we can do here, we can set up a faceted filter. So we need first to run it. And then what you can do here, you can click filter current dashboard. So it will filter all the rest of the graphs based on this graph, on this table actually. So let's save it. And look, variable is preserved, but apparently they don't show it. So, okay, we have this nice graph. We see how much requests to which page types there is, so quite useful. When you click here, it will apply a filter on top based on this condition. Now let's add another widget. So let's switch to our slides. And now we can also add a facet based on response code. So this one. Because sometimes you want to see also a filter based on HTTP status code that is returned by the backend. So let's go back, let's copy paste, let's run. and let's save, and we see, okay, 2,200 response code, and the rest seems okay, so no errors, very good. So the next one is going to be time series as per page type, so you can see over time how much requests has been happening to each of the endpoints. So let's copy paste, and let's create a new widget. Here you will notice that there is one special case for the query, and then you will see we just have a keyword time series. So it will tell New Relic that the chart type that's going to be used is line chart by default, and then it's going to extrapolate. So, okay, let's Control Z. So extrapolate, it's another keyword in New Relic QL that will fill missing values. So let's say if you don't have any values, it will not just break your chart, it will try to assume what is going to be the curve. So that's kind of fills in the gaps. And here we have some charts available for that. So okay, we are improving a little bit our new cool dashboard. We can put this one here, and we can make it something like this. So it's going to be like a long time series, and we can center this to in the middle. Okay, this is looking a little bit nicer. So okay, we might actually make it a little bit taller because it's too much collapsed. So like this is better. So we have number of requests. What else can we use here? You by the way, can see automatically it applies some legend here, so you can filter out specific type of pages by number of requests there. So let's do time series of time to first byte distribution. And this is very interesting query because it shows how many pages need to be improved to the merchant in understandable way. Hey Ubuntu, don't update during my presentation. So let's add a widget, a chart here. Let's pass our query. And okay, unexpected percentage. Oh yeah, the comma is missing. That one we can fix real quick. And here it shows a chart like this, but I like to change the chart type to a stacked bar. And I prefer to set also the y-axis here for maximum to 100 because it's 100% across the pages. And I also like to set custom colors for each of the values. So let's say for the good, I'm going to set green. So merchant will see, okay, where is the button? Or do I need, oh, okay, I need to click something like that. Okay, so nice green color. For, let's say, needs improvement, let's set yellow. And click somewhere here. And for the poor and so on, we're gonna have redder color. Okay. Later on, you would probably try to do something more involved, but it's good to have some good indication, you know, how many requests were served with a good time to first byte. And good time to first byte in my case that I use as a rule is 800 milliseconds. So let's make it like half size of the chart here. With one head, it's hard. Okay. Come on. Okay, we're gonna add another one, and then we will adjust the height of the total thing. Okay, and apparently the height of max value changed. Okay, so we have the unit percentage actually. Oh, no, not pages per second, percentage. Let's save it, and I also want to make sure that it's shown as 100%. So did I not save the y-axis? Okay, so apparently it didn't save this value, and let's put the minimum at 0. Oh, what? Oh, because probably it's 1, apparently. That's weird. Okay, let's try something like this. Okay, now it's better. And to not set up the colors again, I'm just gonna duplicate this one. So let's duplicate it. And now we actually can adjust the height of the second one while we are here. So let's edit this graph. And another important metric that I use is number of database queries distribution. So I consider like less than 120 per page render is good, more than and less than 250 needs improvement, and more than 250 is actually pretty bad. So let's copy over. And let's paste it here as a query. Let's run it. So we see, okay, there is some pages that need to be take a look at, and let's enlarge it here so it's gonna be better visible. So we already have not a bad chart to present for our merchant, right? Merchants like nice colors. So let's go and take a look. There is a couple of more that are available. First, another one is good is to have like a time series with percentiles to see what's percentage of the requests within specific amounts of response time. So let's copy that one and paste it in. This one is okay like this. The only thing that I usually do, I adjust the units, so it shows that it's, for instance, milliseconds. And it looks wrong, honestly. Probably it's not milliseconds, it's probably seconds on a graph. So let's adjust that one. That's too good duration to be in milliseconds, honestly. What kind of magic did you do, Snowdog there? So let's move it a little bit here. Done editing. And what I can do now, I can, let's say, select product listing pages, so PLPs, and then I can see, yeah, okay, so it's in seconds. Apparently, I cannot find the right unit measure there. But here we see that around 60–50% of category pages actually have quite a large amount of database queries. So there is some opportunity for performance optimization, and here where I can show over time to a merchant the trend downwards. So as soon as we deploy new performance optimizations, look, hey, we execute less queries. And that's kind of cool feature of New Relic that you can use. And the last two charts that we're gonna add is actually gonna show us some, oh, it's wrong, window. is going to show us top 10 slow URLs by time to first byte. So we will be able to profile locally, let's say by having a database dump from production with anonymized customer data, of course. And this one is going to be a table. And this one is actually kind of tricky to create because you have to create a select with sub-select inside of it in order to find the top URLs. Because you need to aggregate first and then show top results of aggregation. By default, it's choosing the bar, but for the bar, it's a little bit too early. So we're going to switch to a table. And here now I have a list of request URIs that are slowest performing. And we see for now it's shopping cart. Oh, actually, I wanted to edit the layout to make it a little bit better visible here. So you can see average time to first byte on this specific URL. And when you apply again a filter here, let's say on PLP, then you can see which PLP pages actually the slowest ones. So you can see, okay, shop by brand seems like to be the common slowest page on this merchant with an average time to first byte 620 milliseconds. Not bad, I would say. So now we're gonna add a second one is the top 10 URLs by number of database queries. So let's add this last widget. Run a query, change a type to a table, and make the data a little bit better in size. So now we can see for PLP two different URLs. One is the slowest from time to first byte perspective, and another one is the most database queries on a category page. So we can see there is 383. So it looks like on this page there is some products that causing additional n+1 queries. So we can take a look at it and optimize it later. So that's basically it from New Relic. So thank you very much. Here are some charities that support Ukraine. So if you have any questions. Sorry? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so those dashboards, I think those are related to sales transactions. So they're not really performance metrics. So the Piotr was asking like, okay, maybe you could have this in default dashboard. Unfortunately not. So if you want to find some performance insights, you have basically to write those queries yourself, especially based on URLs in the customer store. Any more questions?
So you do a lot of performance optimizations projects, and have you done any with Hyvä, and what were the issues there?
So I took a look at Hyvä. So I didn't have yet merchants on Hyvä to optimize, but I have a license that I can use to check it out. I didn't run a lot of profiles there. Like in general, it's basically Luma. The only difference, it may be doing too many customer section loads from HTTP perspective. That's, I saw one of the issues, but I already reported it to Hyvä for them to add an option to disable too many loads and make it more efficient from that perspective.
Got it. Thank you. Can I add one more? Yeah, and then if you, for example, if you have a limited budget and time to review the performance, what would be your top 3 places where you would check in New Relic? What would you check with Magento 2?
So with Magento 2 in New Relic, first of all, like transactions, right? It's the first thing that you do. Then you set up dashboards. And then when you see the exact top transactions that are the issue for a customer, then you go and install this shop locally with copy of production database with anonymized customers information, and you run profiles on those specific endpoints that are slow. Because unfortunately, New Relic, like, it can give you direction to follow, but it doesn't show you the final result in where you actually need to find the performance bottleneck. So New Relic is like one of the tools you use for performance optimizations. It's not like the only tool.
So you basically use those dashboards not to look through over time, but actually to find the problem. Because I was thinking that when you need to find the problem, you just run the queries, you see the results, and boom, you're there.
Yeah, so my journey with merchants usually happens, they first give me New Relic access, and then we decide if we actually need to do the actual deep review of the project. Because with New Relic, I can see, are there problems? So New Relic shows me, okay, there are issues, so we need to take a look at it.
Got it. Thank you.
On the beginning of presentation, you've mentioned that it could be expensive for high traffic shops. Do you know how the cost could be optimized? Because at least New Relic states that there are some optimization rules, but I haven't checked that yet, so do you have any experience?
I think the biggest optimization, let's say if you are using Datadog already. So Datadog is very good for log ingestion, right? So you can run good queries for logs in Datadog. In New Relic, unfortunately, that's not that easy to do as in Datadog. So that's where you can actually save a lot of money. So if you only track transactions, that's perfectly good for you. So you wouldn't run too much into the data, because I think the biggest consumer of bandwidth used for ingesting the data into New Relic is actually logs. And Magento has a lot of logs.
So there's also the setting in New Relic about probing frequency, so how often the data goes to New Relic, right? And something that even you haven't mentioned, there's this thing called distributed traces, right? It wasn't there at the beginning of New Relic, but now we can see how data is flowing between different systems components, right? Not only database Redis, but also some outgoing calls to your internal systems or external systems, right? And if there's a lot of data being exchanged there, it also costs some money. So and there's a flag, I think, to disable or limit that probing in that space. So yeah, there are a couple.
So is it in PHP agent or it's just New Relic setting?
That's a good one. I think if you install the Linux PHP agent, it's just there. Even if you will switch back, there's that distributed section on the left, and you will see some external calls, right? Yeah.
Okay, any more questions? Oh, okay, very, very nice. I really like to have some feedback.
I would like to ask, what was the trickiest, curious case you were able to solve by New Relic?
So one of the interesting cases was actually just before Black Friday this year. I had a customer who has like 4 Varnish enterprise nodes set up in production. So they have like cache replication working across 4 Varnish nodes. And there was something that no one was thinking about from their DevOps team to take a look at, and they were complaining like, okay, every 2 days, our varnish nodes actually go down. So the problem was, and I was able to find this problem only because I had New Relic and Datadog. So Datadog has perfect Varnish enterprise-based integration for showing all the metrics, and New Relic has information for that customer, at least for real user monitoring data in browser agent. So I was able to see, okay, the backend application of Magento was responding okay, so there was no slow responses, but the actual LCP was like through the roof when the issue was happening, and then I tracked it down to number of threads created by Varnish. But then I decided, okay, maybe I can combine somehow it with data from AWS. And what happened in the end, that they had GP3 level ABS storage on those Varnish nodes, and they were running into the limit of the data throughput on read. So Varnish was trying to read file from a disk in order to read cache data, and basically all 4 nodes were basically slowed down by a file system. Yeah, so this one was a very interesting case, and it was kind of cool because I received this request from a customer like on the morning my time in Amsterdam, and by the afternoon they were ready for Black Friday in the United States when they start their sales. So we quickly switched to a different EBS storage, like we switched to IO2, but we ran into another problem. So we wanted to go to IO3, but because, IO2, but we had IO1, sorry. I'm a little bit confused with numbers because GP3, but IO2. So we switched to IO2 2 nodes, and the third node, when they started to update the instances with AMI image, it said, limit on your account is reached. Please contact Amazon support. So we had to switch to IO1, and now like the performance of Varnish server nodes for them is pretty good. So it runs without any crashes since Black Friday.
And we have one question from chat from Samir. So he's asking which profiling tool you are using.
So I'm using actually 2 profiling tools. That's kind of crazy because it's a little bit expensive because I'm using Blackfire and I'm using Tidaways. I got into Tidaways quite recently because I met the CEO of the company and he shared information about his product and so on. So I use Blackfire when I need to find actually slow CPU code, and Tidaways for more I/O specific code profiles. So I can see I/O events much more better in Tidaways, but I can see much more better the exact execution path of the code in Blackfire. That's it?
Yeah, so maybe I have one question from myself. Like when working intensively with New Relic, did you see any like issues with running a New Relic agent on a live website? Do you think it's better to keep it running all the time or just turn it on for the task? What do you think is better option?
I would say it's good to turn it on all the time because then you can track and you can integrate it with your CI/CD. So when you do a deployment, you can create a marker in New Relic to specify, okay, we've deployed a new version of the code, and then you can see performance regressions and link it directly to the changes you made. So it's a good ongoing monitoring tool. And where New Relic probably doesn't make sense to use is for real user monitoring data, like the browser agent. There's better tools out there that are less intrusive into your JavaScript performance.
Okay, and somehow related, are there any ideas for alternatives to New Relic? So if for some reason someone don't want to use New Relic or it's expensive, it's a question to you, but maybe someone else in the room can also answer that question.
Probably like if you are on AWS, you can use CloudWatch for some statistics, but you don't really have that much traces. Also, Tidaways actually quite good. Like if you're mainly hosting PHP, Tidaways can be a good APM for you too. I use Tidaways a lot when I'm doing load tests. So I connect Tidaways endpoint during the load test to see automatically complete profile traces of slow code execution passes. Yeah, Datadog also provides the ingestion of the data and agents. Like it has very good implementation for Varnish Plus, but it doesn't have a good implementation for Magento. So that's one of the problems. Like New Relic has out-of-the-box implementations that you don't need to change anything in your store, you don't need to install any additional extensions, it just works.
You know, the thing is that I got this question a few times from my clients, and I even asked this on Twitter. I think I talked with Ivan regarding it, and as Ivan already mentioned, New Relic is the most comprehensive, right? Like what Ivan was not showing, you can also switch to database section there and see database transactions, and from database transactions get back to application transactions. And the other way around, from transaction traces, you can switch to database traces tab. So, and it's not there in any other solution, right? But you know, well, I got the same question mainly due to the costs of New Relic, right? And I mean, there are some options, as you mentioned, Ivan, right? Blackfire has APM, but I never use it. I'm not sure how good or, let's say, bad it is. But
yeah, so as I mentioned, like Blackfire has basically counters. Like it just shows, okay, what is the response time distribution, and it does sometimes profile traces. However, the Blackfire actually has quite a big overhead. So what I like about Tidaways in comparison to production mode, so Tidaways easily can run in production mode. And for instance, I know like Max Cluster in Germany, the hosting provider, like they have Tidaways configured for their customers out of the box. And you can like just click one button and you have it enabled for profiling of the production website. As soon as you have Tidaways license, of course. But also Tidaways is a German company, so I'm not surprised. And Max Cluster is the German hoster, if you didn't know. And with Tidaways, what's good, Tidaways actually captures I/O calls, but it doesn't do CPU traces in production. So you have to click like, hey, give me the next couple of calls a CPU trace for this transaction, so it's less intrusive and it doesn't have much overhead.
Yeah, it might be quite newbie to ask, but sorry. But if you were to analyze like a PWA implementation or just a headless, would you set up anything differently to what you've shown us? That doesn't change anything.
Yeah, so I find it quite hard to analyze it in New Relic. I had one of the customers recently, and we had to do some adjustments to New Relic configuration to track GraphQL queries. So first of all, like you had to do some changes on the code base level to add transaction name based on the query. I had it with a couple of customers where they did it in their integration. And another option, if you, let's say, use PWA solutions that uses hashes for GET queries, then you have actually to include in PHP agent configuration on a server that you want to track hash parameter key in transactions, so it will be stored in New Relic, because New Relic doesn't store any query parameters at all for security reasons, right? So no private data gets leaked in case you send something through GET parameters. So you have to specifically include parameters to be tracked by New Relic. But it's possible, so it's not hard to do. The only thing that in New Relic you will see only one transaction reported like GraphQL resolver endpoint, and that's all. So probably the customer of mine with one need to upgrade to a newer version. Okay.
Like, it was the same, I don't know if you remember, Ivan, it was the same for cron jobs. Cron jobs were reported as unknown transactions. And yeah, that was fixed. The GraphQL queries right now are named. And so, yeah, it helps. Previously, I think the GraphQL was, changes were introduced in 2.4.5. So, yeah, quite recent. So if you're not on that, you will not see it.
No more questions? If we have no more questions, no more public questions, I think it will be time for a short break. We are waiting for food. Fortunately, drinks are here, so we don't have to wait for that. So that's it. So I think let's have a short break. Depending on the pizza, if it will arrive on time or will be a little bit later, we will jump to the next presentation after a shorter break, or we will just proceed to a longer break.
Say something like, I'm the great Oracle or architectural mastermind. But mostly I just do integrations and some performance analysis. Here is a rundown of what we will be talking about today. I'll start with explaining a little bit more about the clickbaity title of this presentation. Next, a brief recap of my previous presentation here about the Magewire library. With some additional information that I hinted at but skipped at previous presentation. Then we'll go ahead and without go ahead to what you usually expect from my presentations. So technical deep dive and loads of code on the slides. Yes. And basically a rundown what you would be expecting your work to look like if you are working with Magewire Hyvä Checkout. Later on, some extra content regarding my contributions to Magewire Checkout ecosystem. And to finish it up, recap of actual clickbaity title, the 2 hours it took me to perform the task. Okay, so the backstory for the Anonymous checkout. We have a client with erotic toys store. And to encourage sales, we want to make clients feel safe and anonymous. So to avoid scenarios when someone goes, oh, I know, you are a little pervert. Thankfully, in Poland, we have shipping methods where you only have you and a big metal box that just wants to know your phone number. So you can pick up your nasty little things there. But remember, this is only fake anonymity. You are never anonymous in the internet. Okay, so the goal is here. Take only the minimal required subset of customer data that is required to fulfill shipment. So if you want to receive your package in the big box, we only need your phone number and email. If you don't want invoice, we don't need any of your data because you want just have a receipt. Of course, later on, I found out from our sales team that this is not about being anonymous. And we have a lot of queries for, hey, let's bring the select shipping method step in front because they've done the cheapest UX audit possible. Look what Zalando does, and we want the same. Okay, so now you have a moment to think and scream inside. How much time would this take in your checkout implementation? And to solve that, let's go back into technicalities and run through a little reminder of what Magewire library is. And it's basically what powers all the Hyvä Magewire Checkout. Yeah, hints in the name. So Magewire is part of Laravel Lightwire library that heavily relies on Alpine.js because it's done by the same guy that wrote Alpine.js. And he actually talks that Alpine.js was the missing tool he needed to build Livewire. And it aims at rapidly building reactive frontends with components. Of course, big difference between what you first think when you hear reactive components, so React.js, Vue.js. This one is different because all your business logic and your templates live server-side and are written in PHP. It follows the trend of no JavaScript And of course, by no JavaScript, we mean you heavily rely on JavaScript, but tell yourself lies that you don't rely on JavaScript because you didn't write any of it. And all the interactions are described by attributes in HTML. While the Alpine.js is observing all the actions on the front end and triggering calls to the business logic, you cannot escape the fact that is that all your business logic and all your templates still live on the server. And if they all live in a server, the only way you can be reactive is just to replace a bunch of HTML markup on your page. So you are not reactive at all. And also, all this HTML is returned by single endpoint in Magento, endpoint that have to initiate sessions, endpoint that have to load all the layout XML. So it's not really a white knight on a white horse solving all your performance problems. It may be adding some. Okay, but to build more complex solutions, like the checkout page, we need more than one component and a way to communicate between them. Last time I already hinted that Magewire component is just a Magento block. So, like with every block, you can build a hierarchy of them. So there is nothing that stops your component for having more child blocks that also are Magewire components. We can see here that executing another component is just, hey, get child HTML. For more sophisticated cross-component interactions, Magewire offer events. And we can see that we can define event listeners. So when Magewire event happens, it will call selected method. So like shipping method was selected, event was called, we call refresh on our block. And to communicate outside of your block, not just receive communications, you can broadcast an event to all the components that will listen to you, send event to one specific block, or even dispatch just standard JavaScript event. So you can, with just document, listen, subscribe to an event. Okay, moving on to the checkout. Magewire Hyvä Checkout is unique. Is unique because by using Magewire library, it skips what probably all the other checkouts would do. So it doesn't use Magento REST API. Because if you look at, even at Luma, when you are placing order, you are not doing standard place order, but it was actually calling the REST API. Of course, this comes as like, with great powers comes great responsibility. So yes, you have nicer flow, but you have to prepare all your integrations to work with this. And on the first reading of the documentation, you will see this thing has been built by developers, for developers, and they heard it all. They know all the cases for customization you are expecting, And there is always something that, oh, this is the way to go. Okay, but let's talk out of the box. Hyvä Magewire Checkout comes with actually 3 different checkouts, because you can select between one-page checkout and 2 flavors of 2-step checkout. One for the desktop, one for the mobile. And mobile checkout does work by detection of user agent. I'm not a big fan of this approach, so if you can make your checkout work on mobile using standard CSS shenanigery, I strongly recommend still using just CSS. But this presentation is not about just using out-of-the-box stuff. It's about customization and flexibility of this tool. This means you can configure your own checkout with any steps you want. Here on the slide, we see condensed version of the definition of those free checkouts that are provided out of the box. It not only describes blocks, but also can have conditions. Here we can see condition for login step. And we have 2 conditions. You have to be a guest, and the login is required. So when you combine them, because both of those have to be met, we have another 3rd step in our 2-step checkout. Similar example is here, when you can remove the block for shipping when all your items in cart are virtual. Also worth mentioning, with mobile team, we have hierarchy, so we can just extend existing 2-step checkout. Here only just to change step names for shorter one to work on mobile, and also change layout from 2 columns to 1 column. And actually in the example I showed earlier, you can see it's not only condition, but an update. And if you think update, you can hear in yourself, layout XML update. And yes, layout XML updates are and handles are the building blocks of this checkout. So for every checkout you define, you can see you can expect for every step you can define your own layout handle. Work with me. So we can see here on the files that are bundled with the original module files, just for the used for every type of checkout defined. So main file only for default to be used every time, same for 1 page. But also you can have specific steps as specific handles. Here is a condensed version of the 1-step checkout XML layout update. And probably you can see it's mostly just moving blocks or containers, components between the columns in your layout. So here we have 1-page checkout. It is 3 columns, so just assign every component into proper block. And to enable this quite simple configuration, they gone with quite neat trick, I would say. All the components that you can use in your checkout are defined within one container that doesn't really exist in your standard document tree. Because the container is defined as a reference container and all the child blocks are added there, but this container is not attached to any other container. So there's no parent for it, meaning that if we were to render it with all the blocks there, nothing that exists there will be rendered. This lovely image contains all the components that are defined out of the box in Hyvä_checkout_components layout handle. And these are all the blocks you can use to build your checkout. Of course, you are not able to see anything here, but if we were to look into some of those blocks, most of them that just have like title block and before and after containers. So there's a lot of places that you can just put your blocks to have them with the logic you need. But there's also a lot of dedicated blocks. For example, every specific shipping method and payment method has its own block. But more on that later. Having all those components to handle checkout written from scratch allowed creators to provide more functionality, like customizing shipping and billing address forms. It can be done via admin HTML. With an admin panel, you can change the order of fields, size of the actual field, tooltip messages, turn on fields, turn on requirement, and there is a public service announcement that, even though those checkboxes are grayed out, you can actually click them. There's a lot of people on the Slack, hey, how can I enable or disable this? Because it's grayed out. It actually works. I know they have on a roadmap to go back here and fix it so it's not confusing, because the enable and required can be checked for every item. But address form in checkout is not as simple as just static list of fields. You can, of course, edit them dynamically by registering form modifiers. Typical behaviors for form modifiers that are shipped out of the box is something like hiding email address field for logged in customer, ensuring that your region ID is required or not, depending on the country you're in. Same story with a postcode. Moreover, modifiers are applied in 3 phases, so you can react to data showing up and being removed from there. Come on, move. Okay, so shameless plug time. Last time I were here, I told you that I already prepared some community module, some compatibility modules for selected local shipping and payment methods. The task I described as quite easy and quite fun to work with, because it resembled me working with older Magento 1. And all those modules are available on Snowdog apps GitHub. And I already mentioned that the checkout differs due to use of Magewire. So do you really need all those compatibility modules to make your shipping or payment method works? As always, it depends. Our favorite answer in IT. For example, if we look at delivery with DHL Poland, you could actually get working their original module get working, but you will be without basically one or two features. Obviously, the big one is you cannot select parcel shop for the delivery to machine because it requires additional user input. But if it's for standard DHL courier delivery, you don't gather any additional information, so it just works. So for shipping methods, you are probably good to go to just check what you need. But also I found one payment method that also worked out of the box. It was for Twisto. And Twisto worked by just adding a block to start your form for applying for the credit, just as a block in the success page. So it didn't require you to input any additional data on the checkout page, didn't change any redirects, just working by not abrupting checkout. Also worth mentioning, if you're working with Hyvä, they are maintaining a module list compatibility tracker in their GitLab. And there is a separate one for checkout integrations. Okay, so payments methods. Most payment methods for Poland do actually require you to redirect customer after a payment. So with the new flow of placing orders, you can register a place order service. And with this service, you can actually just write a function that returns the URL you want the customer to be redirected to. Also, you can take the quote and do some stuff to it just before it turns into order. So you want to save some additional information, convert something. You can still do this here without needing to write million lines of JavaScript. Yeah, that's all here. And as I mentioned before, for every method, you can just define a block that will be displayed when your payment or shipping method is selected. And this is the way to interact and collect additional data from your customer. So everything you need extra should be contained within this single component or hierarchy or components. And you can just make sure the name corresponds to your method code and it will be shown. Components also have ability to declare additional logic just for the Hyvä checkout to define conditions that will enable or disable going to the transitioning to the next step. So here is an example for in-post packaging machines. We have the evaluate completion method. First we check if this is the method selected. If it's not, we do not block the checkout or just advancing to an additional step. Then we can check if we collected the data we needed, and based on that, prevent going to the next step. Also, as this is just a logic that happens, I decided to also persist the information I collected here to the quote and return a success message so we can go to the next step. There is another additional feature within the step navigation. When I asked on the Slack, where is the best place to capture the click payment method, so I can integrate hosted payments credit card fields and tokenize it. You can actually register a callback with Hyvä Checkout navigation object. You can add a task that will be evaluated every time there is attempt to navigate forwards or backwards. So with payment methods, this would be the good moment to capture those hosted payments, to perform the tokenization. And as you can see, we are returning here a promise. So the engine behind this actually will wait for the promise to resolve. So I have actually here call to external service that checks it. If it fails, I can and on a result I can call another. For example, here when we get the response, I'm just calling upon the component and executing component message, so I can save the credit card token I got from the external service, or just send a message to my component that, hey, you failed. It will go through a service, resolve its state, and later it can also have an effect of, hey, you cannot progress to next step, the changes failed. However, from documentation, I understand that this feature, like collecting credit card data with hosted iframes payment method, suggested way of solving this problem would be just to have in your component a button there on the component itself that, hey, capture my card now. Display on your component that this is, hey, we captured your card, you are okay to go further. From documentation, I think this is the preferred way, but honestly, with our customers, I don't think they would be appreciative of additional interaction to do. But also, I also think that this add task is still an undocumented on purpose feature, so still subject to change. Okay, so let's get back to my clickbaity title and the history of implementing anonymous checkout with Hyvä Magewire Checkout. So for the first step you have to do, just declaring in your model you have new checkout type. Here is just copy-paste from the two-step checkout. Next, we want to, for my implementation, next thing we wanted to achieve is to have the shipping method selection in front of address. So just, again, copy-paste standard two-step checkout, and just change their order. It's simple layout XML operation. I also added here a new component because I don't know if you noticed before. We had the additional chooser. Do you want a receipt or do you want an invoice? And if you want the receipt, there is no billing form. If you want an invoice, there is a billing form. So just adding here our new component, checkout sale document, and making sure that the payment section, billing address section is a child of this component. So our new component can be the one that decides if this component is rendered or not. Okay, so we added new component. Well, we hinted at adding new components, so now we have to define it within Hyvä_checkout_ components file. And as you can see, it's just block definition with arguments saying what Magewire component backend works. Then maybe we should also implement the rest of the component. So we have the business logic. Business logic collects one single property. Is your document a receipt or an invoice? Within this, we will use just checkout session to store the customer decision. So here in the mount life cycle function, every time the page is refreshed, we will just check in the session what was the last last state. Because while you are on a page, between all interactions, state of your Magewire component is preserved in the browser. When you refresh the page, the state is lost. So every time we interact with component, at the end of the dehydration stage of the component lifecycle, we just save the selection to the session. On the template side, things are easier. Just 2 radio buttons, invoice, receipt. And if you want invoice, we actually allow to render the child block of the billing address form. So this is when the fun begins. We go out from the standard XML and go into plugins. Before plugin, we have form modifier. So, as I said before, we can define register form modifiers for forms. So here, we want to check. We are at the step that we want to remove all the fields we don't want from our address form. So I went a bit lazy way and decided to inject all the methods I want to act upon and all the fields I want, just inject them with DI XML. So don't have to build like fancy admin panel for this, as it does not get changed often. And later on, we just testing if this is the method I should remove the things, and if this is the method and this is not the field I want to see, Just remove it. And we can, and now we have, now we have a address form that will change in context, depends on shipping method we choose, but it will only happen when we refresh the page. So in order to have this happen every time we choose different method, we add a plugin for after we update the selected shipping method to trigger an event that will refresh the shipping address form on the front end. At this moment, we can see on our page that we change method. Form gets smaller, bigger, depending on the method we change. But when we leave it for a second, some timeout executed, and the forms wanted to autosave. And in this moment, we've seen two nice errors that, hey, we cannot save this address, required fields are not there. So there's another plugin we have to write, because it's just standard core Magento validation on the address object. So we want to introduce some additional logic here. So if this address is not part of the quote, leave the validation as it was. Then, if this is a shipping method, if this is a shipping address, and the shipping method is not one that we care about, so not one that we remove fields, still processes as usual. If this is a billing address and you want an invoice, still do as usual. If this is a billing address and you didn't want an invoice, don't bother validating. We don't care about this address. And of course, our decision tree got us to the situation that we know this is a shipping address. This is a shipping address for a method we care about. So we only need to check if the telephone is there. And this is the point, the original 2 hours of my, hey, let's figure out how to do it ends. At this point, I went for a break to our office kitchen. There I met Kuba and telling to Kuba, yo, dude, the anonymous checkout, easy, done in 2 hours. That Hyvä checkout is dope. Oh, yeah. I should message Bartek and tell him I will do a presentation on the next meetup. So I did, finished my hot beverage, got back to my desk, and it was the moment he knew he fucked up. Because I was checking it only as a guest. When you log in, your Magento checkout experience is way different. Because you can have saved addresses. You can save the address you just typed in. And of course, if you are a bad developer and allow your customer to save an address that only has a telephone in it, and then he on the next attempt will try to use his saved address that has nothing in it for a method that he wants to, that needs those fields, he can be stuck, and your checkout may not go as well. Okay. So, more digging in. After looking in a code and asking for help on Slack, finally found our first culprit, where the button for save this address in your history is. Turns out it is added by a form modifier. So we are going back to our form modifier. It turns out this happens in the second or third phase of the form modifiers going through your checkout. So we registering a listener for an event when the phase starts. That's this part. And when an event occurs and it is the time, we just, as usual, check if your current method is the method that should prohibit saving address. Yes, then just remove the save button. Okay. So there is another culprit that will make our life hard. This time it is my shipping address and billing address are the same button. Fortunately, there is already logic that removes this button. It was designed originally for cards that contains only virtual products. So adding one simple plugin to make all the logic think that yes, this is a virtual card. You should not show this button. Okay, so at this moment, with our two previous steps, we introduced additional logic that was actually changing content not only of our shipping address form, but also billing address form. So we have to dispatch our event to force the refresh on another occasion. And also, because we hit the button, it doesn't mean that we change the flag on the quote itself. So every time you are forcing the button to go away, you still have to clear the flag. Okay. And in testing, it starts to look like it's going okay. But I noticed that every time I trigger the refreshing of the billing address, I actually seen three calls made to the API to do the same refresh. Looking there, in console also are 2 unhandled exceptions. In the line you can see, but looking around, this is a queue of objects that need to be processed by Magewire internally. This is the queue, and looking around it, nothing in the code around adds objects that are not Magewire components. So strange. So jumping into the debugger, adding the queue to the watch list. Okay, so I see this is an array. It says array 4, but it has only 3 elements. Oh. Later on, I looked on the code that every time the component is processed, component clears itself from the list but it does by the index that the line we are changing is finding. And actually, the queue array still had 4 elements, but the first element was empty. So it didn't show in the debugger. But JavaScript, being JavaScript, was funny. Removing first element of the queue just got you undefined on the first element. So that's the first thing I had to submit to the Magewire stuff to fix. As you can see, the pull request is very easy. Just make sure your item is not undefined when you're trying to find the ID. Unfortunately, it wasn't the only problem that still existed there. So when you went on the page, interacted with it a bunch, and clicked place order, nothing happened. Nothing. When you refresh the page, get the full checkout of all the configurations you placed, place order, yeah, placed order, no problem. So I told you about the navigation tasks mechanism. And this is somehow related. When you navigate between steps, it checks it waits for all the tasks to complete. And when all your tasks complete, it also will check all the components if they are allowing or disallowing the navigation. We talked about this earlier, right? With the box machine. Between those two checks, there is another check. There is a check to verify is Magewire idle. So basically, navigation code listens to events emitted by Magewire. Hey, I will be fetching this. I'm fetching this component, finished fetching this component. So based on those interactions, they built a list of the components you are waiting for to be refreshed. But it turns out I'm probably the first guy that used emitting event to a single component, because original code just takes, give me all components that can react to a given listener and add them to the list. Since I was dispatching refresh method that basically all components on a website can react to, but I was emitting it to one single component, my checkout was pending because it was waiting for a lot of components to refresh, but they were never to be refreshed. So very quick if should solve the issue for you in the future. Okay. I think we have reached and breached the limit of the code you can see on the slides today. So here is a small summary. Magewire Hyvä Checkout is great developer experience, at least from my perspective. It was very easy for me to do the customization. Even if you do not need customizations, you already have 3 different checkouts within one. Because it breaks away from the standard Magento checkout ways, it's, in my opinion, easier and faster to integrate your payment and shipping methods. However, because of this, you have to prepare custom integration methods that would follow the new flow. Okay, that's all, folks. If you have any questions, I'm here.
So I saw on one of your slides you were saving some data in checkout. So do you know, like, if session is blocked during all of the Magewire session itself?
Yes, they do. Every Magewire component interactions calls endpoint in Magento. Every component calls the same endpoint, and endpoint starts, just boots up. It's like standard front-end controller. It starts session. From the body of the post method, your LiveWire magic sends to the Magento. It knows what layout handles it needs to initiate, and then initiate full layout, XML layout with those handles, and based on that, initiate blocks and performs operations on the basically view models attached to those blocks.
Are there any performance penalty because of that?
I think a lot. we hinted at it at the last presentation, but yes. Rendering when the Magewire component renders for the first time, it calls some logic. It also calls more logic on rendering because it checks that the template is compatible, because every component has to have like one root element. So it validates the resulting markup, and within the resulting markup, it also injects some HTML attributes for resulting code. So it does a lot.
Hello? Yeah, sorry. I wanted to ask about the master flow. You were saying about the master flow that in order to work with Hyvä and Checkout, you have to deal with master flow. I wonder how time-consuming or inconvenient was it? And you can go into the details. What does it mean to take care of it?
So I briefly described you what I achieved in 2 hours. So I think in 2 hours of working, I achieved mostly my goal. So customized checkout, changed orders, added different logic. Before that, I spent like 2 or 3 hours on reading the documentation. So I knew what to expect. And maybe on that, like 5 to 10 hours on creating the compatibility modules. So I don't think that a lot of work went into it. The documentation is pretty nice and explains quite a lot of stuff with some nice examples. Of course, first reading of the documentation, I still was, how do I port the method? How do I make it compatible? But because there is a repository of the other compatibility modules, I looked like PostNL, like the Netherlands method, looked how they did stuff, and oh yeah, that's crazy, easy. Just remember that everything you have in your own component, the place order flow is basically the place order service was like 5 methods. So it was quite easy to, this? Yeah, just taking over the control at just placing the order, can this method place order, and basically adding the redirect. I think it's quite easy, as I said. And as I said, because it's looked quite easy, is the whole purpose why I decided to do the presentation.
Got it. Thank you. I have another question about the Magewire. If someone would like to try it out, what would be the best or ideal training task that you would advise to go with?
On a simple Magewire, I would actually go to the original Laravel Livewire. They have screencasts on how to do stuff in Laravel, and I would try to replicate it in Magewire. Those are the steps I learned Magewire preparing the presentation for last month.
Okay, thank you. And I wasn't able to make a photo of shameless plug. Could you please bring the slide back?
Sure. Obviously, it's not my graphic, but I found it on Slack someday.
I love it.
I saw that you can order somewhere a t-shirt with it, so just Google shameless plug image.
There was one question from Jose. If you started only with Hyvä Checkout documentation or with Magewire documentation?
When you go to Hyvä Magewire documentation, the first section is Introduction to Magewire. So while reading the Magewire Checkout documentation, you start with the basics of Magewire, so both.
Okay, any more questions? Any more questions online? Wait a moment. Okay, looks like no more questions. So Kamil, thank you very much for this presentation.
Thank you.
And I think that without break, we will proceed to the last presentation. So Bartek, where are you? And when waiting for Bartek, ready? But we can also have Alex from Headworks, who is here with us, to tell a few words about the event that they are organizing. Yes, Alex, you can take this microphone. So it's like I'm really excited to have so many guests from not only all over the Poland, but all over the world. So yeah, Alex, feel free to tell about your upcoming event.
Yeah, just a few words. So, we're organizing Meet Magento Florida on January 31st next year. It's going to be a couple of days of fun and insightful tracks. So if you guys are considering to come as a visitor or to sponsor or to have a speaking opportunity there, please make sure to let me know. And we'll think of the options. If you consider speaking, then please act as soon as possible. We only have a couple of days left until we finalize the agenda. I think we finalized the most of it. So yeah, just reach out to me, Alexander Galzo, on Twitter, in Mage-OS chat, Mage chat, or here, whatever you prefer. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. I have to say that Meet Magentos are getting back the vibe that we knew from old events, so it's really a good sign for all Magento professionals, developers, project managers. Both Meet Magento New York and Meet Magento Netherlands were amazing events, amazing in terms of content and also in terms of networking. So I believe this one will be great too. I think there is Meet Magento India also coming in a week later in February. So like everyone who likes to combine work and travel, that's like a really interesting opportunity. Okay, so I think Bartek, if you want to connect. You can see that Bartek is carrying some small symbol or a very secret organization. You know, Illuminati is nothing compared to that. Okay, so ready, Bartek, it's your time.
So as we see, almost ready. Okay, so now we are. So hello everyone, I'm Bartek Górski. I work as a senior commerce technical architect at Adobe, and today I'm going to show you some basics of Git hooks. So first of all, a question for you guys. So how many of you are using Git hooks in your projects on a daily basis? Hands up. Okay, we have a couple of hands, but mostly the audience is not using Git hooks, which is great because this is going to be an introductory presentation. So I'm not going to cover any fancy use cases. I'm just going to show you how the concept works. But let's start with the background. So as we all know, in our projects, there are always some quality standards. Like, for example, on the backend side, we need to run the code sniffer, mess detector, PHP scan perhaps. On the storefront side or front-end side, we need to run some JavaScript linters, etc. We need to create tests. We also need to maintain tests that are currently there in the project. We need to just ensure that they don't break. We need to ensure that the API isn't broken, like GraphQL, REST, whatever we use. And of course, we need to ensure that the overall architecture of our new code just makes sense, right? So for the last task, manual code review is obviously invaluable. But as for the rest of those tasks, there is always some tool that we just need to run that is probably pre-configured for us. We just need to remember to run it every time. So the issue, when developers are asked to run a tool every time they finish their code, where sooner or later they will forget about this. And with one tool that may be easy to just remember about this, with two tools, sure, still, but if you have to run like 10 tools, then probably at some point people will only remember about 8 of them, maybe 7 of them, and as a result, the technical debt will grow. So, the solution for the issue. Repetitive tasks, like running some linters, sniffers, etc., they can be run using Git hooks. So what are those Git hooks? So they are basically some actions that Git is performing to which you can hook with your custom logic. So for example, we have the commit message action or the pre-commit action. So whenever a developer is creating their commit message, you can have some custom logic checking that message. Whenever the developer is about to commit the code to the repository, you can have some custom logic that checks if this code is okay. So the list that we see on this slide here, it's not a complete list. It lists the most basic and most useful, in my opinion, actions. For the complete list, you can just visit this link there. But mostly in here, we will focus on the pre-commit Git hook, because that's the one that we will use the most with our linters. So this is actually where those Git hooks are stored. So in the .git directory, you have a subdirectory called hooks, and in there, for every hook, you have a file. And in those files, you can inject your custom logic. And now comes the issue with the solution for the issue. So manually doing that, well, first of all, you need to know to which file you want to add your custom logic. Well, that's an easy part. Then you have to know what to put there. Well, also an easy task. Probably it will take you like 1 hour to get there, to actually get familiar with what's there. But then the real issue is, how do you ensure that other developers working on your project will do the same thing? Because as we all know, the .git directory is not part of the remote repository. It won't get pushed with the rest of the code. So how do we ensure that whatever you want to have there in those Git hooks actually ends up on every machine of every developer working on the project? And here comes the solution for the issue with the solution for the issue. Fortunately for us, there are some Git hook managers. So in here, I listed 4 of them. So there is Captain Hook, Gram.php, Whiskey, and Composer Git hooks, which sadly doesn't have any fancy logo. And yeah, we will focus on those. There are more tools. So if you Google Git hook managers, you will see more than just those 4. But those are the most popular. So on those, we will focus. So the details. So first of all, every of those tools has only one maintainer. Well, at least on the packagist. Well, it's not optimal. It would be nice to have a tool which is maintained by more people, but well, let's call it a tie, right? Everyone has only one maintainer, so no winners, no losers. The next thing that we can see here is the number of installs, but that one I will actually skip because it's not really representative of how popular the tool is. All it takes is a couple of projects with a lot of deployments that pull from the packagist, and you can have millions of installs. So I won't focus on that. What I will focus on is the number of forks and the number of watchers. So as we can see here, not sure if exact numbers are visible, but for Captain Hook, the first one, we have 21 watchers and 83 forks. The next one, Gram.php, 83 watchers and 474 forks. The next one, Whiskey, 6 watchers, 6 forks. And the last one, Composer Git hooks, that one has 12 watchers and 78 forks. So that brings us to some initial conclusions about those tools. That Whiskey, well, it's not as popular as other solutions. So for some reason on my personalized Google results, it shows pretty high, not sure why, but yeah, it's not as popular as other ones. So Composer Git hooks, well, the numbers looked good, but the real issue that wasn't presented on the previous slide is that it has only 2 dependencies, one on the PHP version and one on some Symfony package, which is great. Only 2 dependencies. Wow, it will always be compatible. But not with Magento. The only non-PHP version dependency it has is actually not compatible with Magento dependencies. So unfortunately for us, we have to discard this one. So let's focus on the Captain Hook and on Gram.php. So let's compare them. First of all, the PHP version, which with this is compatible. So Captain Hook, greater or equal to 8.0, and Gram.php, 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, all of the patch version for those. So that's pretty much a tie there. Well, my conclusion would be that perhaps on Gram.php, someone actually bothers to check if this is compatible with a new version. On Captain Hook, it's just everything that's greater than 8, well, compatible. I'm not saying that no one is checking that, but yeah, I would rather trust GrumPHP on this one. Next thing, the number of dependencies. So on Captain Hook, we have 10 dependencies, and 3 of them are Symfony packages. So I'm mentioning it here because, as we all know, Magento/Adobe Commerce is dependent on a few Symfony packages. So the more Symfony packages we have as dependencies of those tools, the greater the risk that this at some point may stop being compatible with Adobe Commerce. So we have 10 dependencies on Captain Hook with 3 Symfony packages. On GrumPHP, we have 21 dependencies with 10 of them being Symfony packages. So, well, there is a greater risk associated with using GrumPHP, but also it shows that the tool is more complex and more powerful. Next one, the number of contributors. We have 34 contributors on Captain Hook, and we have 176 contributors on GrumPHP. So in here, we see that GrumPHP is way more popular, and people are contributing to it. So that's good. That's a win for Grump. Next one, actively developed, commits every few days. That's actually true for both of them. So they are both actively developed, and that's great. Let's move to the next one. And in here, we also have a tie, the number of open issues. There is 8 open issues on Captain Hook, 7 on Grump. So that's a pretty low number, so we can be happy with both. Next row. So Captain Hook, and in here, this is the biggest difference between those tools. So on Captain Hook, it's a fairly simple application. It allows you to run some commands with some variables. So if you know your commands, like if you know how to run, for example, mess detector or code sniffer, you are pretty much only pasting those commands in there, and it will work. On the other hand, we have GrumPHP, which is heavily customized with different configurables for different tools, and there is a lot of supported tools. So I will show you that on an example later on, but basically there is, those tools take the opposite approach. So Captain Hook aims to be simple. You are pasting commands, those commands work, and Captain Hook, it gives you a lot of customization. You don't have to know how the commands look like, but on the other hand, you have to know how those customization inside GrumPHP work. So basically, you have to know the documentation of Captain Hook, of Grump. You don't have to know the documentation of those tools. The next one. So Captain Hook is pre-configured with support for some tools. It will ask you if you want to run this, if you want to run that at the point of installation, but there is only a few things there. And you probably have to do some manual config for those tools anyway. And GrumPHP, so again, that's the other side of the scale. It supports over 60 different tools as of today, but, well, you still have to manually configure them. I will show that on an example later on as well. And then Captain Hook outputs only the output of those commands. On GrumPHP, you can configure the output. Next one. Both of them can fail at the first tool that fails from the list that you configured, or they can run everything. So a tie in here. And then this is actually one of the important things. So on Captain Hook, you have the main configuration file, but apart from that file, which you will want to store in your repository, apart from that file, you have another file that you can create that will customize this configuration. So this will be great for teams that don't have strict rules as to how your local development should look like. Like, for example, if some people are using Docker, other people are using XAMPP on Windows, they will want to have this second file to make it work in their case. And with that, you don't risk that this difference in configurations will end up in the repository. You can just git ignore the second file and that's it. And GrandPHP, it actually works with only one configuration file. And the last thing, that's a minor thing, but I thought I will mention it here. So Captain Hook has the configuration stored in JSON format, whereas GrandPHP stores it in a YAML format. In my opinion, YAML is better. So JSON is nice for sending the data through the network because it's optimized and it doesn't allow you to, for example, add comments. So great for sending over the network, but in case of some tool that you will run locally, you may want to have some comments. And YAML is simply better because it allows comments, whereas JSON does not. So the setup, how to set up this. So this is actually fairly simple. So first of all, we need to run one command, and I listed those commands in here. So that's a configure command. So either vendor bin Captain Hook configure or vendor bin GrandPHP configure. And it will ask you some questions, and it will create the configuration file. And then you have to run a second command, which is install for Captain Hook or git init for GrandPHP, which will read that configuration file and actually install hooks in the .git/hooks directory. And lastly, you will want to put those git init commands or install commands, whatever you are using, in your composer JSON file in the main project, in the post install command or post update command. So with this, you get sure that with every update or installation of your entire project, this actually ends up in the .git directory. And in here, we have a sample of the setup for Captain Hook. So this is the configure command. And as you can see, it asks only a few questions. Well, I hope you can see it because the contrast is not really that great, but hopefully you can see it. So it asks you if you want to validate your commit messages, if you want to check your files for syntax errors, if you want to run PHP unit before committing, then it asks you what's the command for PHP unit. So you have some option of having different configurations there. Then it asks you if you want to run PHP-CS before committing, and then it asks you about the command for running this PHP-CS. So as you can see, not much of a configuration. It doesn't mean that it only supports those few tools like PHP-CS or PHP unit. It supports more, but on the configuration part, it only asks you about those. And this is a configuration command for GrandPHP. So it asks you about, well, almost or over actually 60 tools that you want to use in your project. So it's actually nice because you can see this big list of tools, and maybe you will want to research what actually they do, because probably no one here in this room is familiar with 60 tools that can be used for improving our code. So it's nice that it lists those tools. So you can just select the ones you want, like 0, 1, 12, whatever you wish to run. You can just input the number and hit enter. And then the actual configuration file. Again, I'm not sure if you can see this here or not because of the contrast, but basically what it's added here is some actions. So we have a structure that on the top level, it has those Git hooks, like commit dash message, and then it's specified if it's enabled or not, because you may have some configuration that partially you want to disable at some point in the project, and it specifies actions. So as we can see, after selecting yes for all those configuration options in the configure command, we actually get some output here, which is nice. And this is actually an example of what may be useful for Magento. So in here, we have a config, which is actually one of the few things that is not about hooks themselves, but how you run those hooks. So in my case, I'm using Warden, and I want to run my hooks from inside of the container. So I have to configure it like here. And also for the pre-commit here, we have the code sniffer with the Magento coding standard. And at the end of that long line, you may see it or not, but there is actually a nice feature that Captain Hook has. There is a variable with staged files. So you have to pass that variable for the command to get all the files. And you have some basic ways of manipulating this. Like in this example, I'm only running PHP-CS for PHP files, because that may be what I want. So I can filter the staged files variable. As I said, quite a nice feature. And now, GrandPHP. So on the first screenshot, you see the configuration file after I selected some tools from that big list. So we have tasks, PHP-CS null, PHP-MD null, PHP-stan null, and PHP-unit null. Those nulls are configs for those tools. And with this output, this simply won't work. So it gives you the basics, but you still have to check the documentation on how to configure those things that you want to run. And below, there is an example of what I already configured here. So again, I'm running this from inside of a Warden container. And also, I specified that for the PHP-CS, the standard is Magento 2. And for PHP mess detector, there is one rule set. But as you can see here, this configuration is not the same for those tools. So in PHP-CS, we have a variable standard. On PHP-MD, we have a rule set. And the rule set doesn't get the string. It gets an array of rule sets. So basically, this means that for whatever you want to configure, you really have to check the documentation, because there is no standardized way to just configure everything with the same variables there. And now the results. So for GrandPHP, I actually truncated this result here because it also shows you a nice face similar to the logo. So it runs two things in here, PHP-CS and PHP-MD, like on the previous slide. This is what I configured. And it shows the output. So it actually mixes the output, so you don't really know which part of the output is from which tool. In our example here, on this second screenshot, the first line is from PHP-MD, and everything below that is from PHP-CS. If you know the tool, you know from where this came from. If you don't, well, maybe you just don't care. But yeah, it could be a bit better, I think. And in here, we have Captain Hook. So on Captain Hook, I only configured PHP-CS, and this is the output. So it failed because I added some module that will just fail on purpose. What is not nice about this command is that it says that it failed to execute the command. So first thing I thought about this is that I somehow misconfigured this. So I checked the command if it works directly. It did. Then I checked the documentation. Maybe I did something wrong in the documentation. Well, I didn't. So basically, this failed to execute means that it did execute the thing, but it just ended with errors, basically. So, well, they may want to phrase this a bit better in some future release, in my opinion. But, well, it works. So, the conclusion. When configured, both tools are actually doing the job. So, that's the most important thing. They are doing the job. So, the choice that you may make to choose one over another, it just depends on your preferences. If you prefer to have a simple tool on which you can control your commands, or you prefer a tool that is partially pre-configured, you can just check the documentation and configure all those quality tools using the documentation. So, well, the choice is up to you, because basically both those tools work. And now the Q&A part. Questions? Do you have any questions?
Can I? So, you know, Bartosz, you told us, you showed us that there are like, for one of the tools, 60 or 70
GRAMP? Yeah.
Yeah, tools, whatever, plugins.
Yeah, exactly.
Call it, right? But can you actually write your own?
Yes.
Because
sorry, I
know
covered
this
that.
one guy, Bartosz, who once wrote his own coding standards for Magento 2, right? So if I would like to do something like that here, is it possible?
Yeah, so in both tools you can use your own coding standard, but to answer your broader question, if you can use your own commands or your own tools, yes, you can. Sorry, I haven't covered this. So both tools actually, well, it's more obvious for Captain Hook, because Captain Hook is just a set of commands that you put in there, so you can use pretty much everything. On GRAMP PHP, there is a pre-configured set of tools that you can use, but you can also have something custom. So you can have some class with a static method that will do the job, and you can either run your commands from inside that class, or you can get some input to the class and do your checks, whatever you want. Or if you want, you can also contribute to the tool and create a configuration for your tool and just create, for example, your own project with this. So there is a lot, actually, of such projects that add support for tools that are not included on the initial list. So basically, you can also do this in both tools.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we have one.
And what is the approach of different environments for different developers? Is it only with allowing to have this file configured for each developer, or is it possible to the tool to check what environment developer uses and predefine it?
So if you would like to configure GRAMP with different environments, that would probably be more challenging. I think you would have to customize it somehow, because out of the box, GRAMP PHP only has one configuration file. So if someone uses Warden, some other people may use the Docker stack from Mark Shast. There is nothing that would allow you out of the box to use different approaches there. But in Captain Hook, you can just have this second configuration file. Everyone will have to still add it manually, but it's possible. So you are putting the main configuration file in the repository, and you can have this second configuration file manually distributed for people that need it. So the main can say that we are using Warden, for example, to run all the commands, and the second one will override this with other stuff.
Okay, is it interacting, because it probably needs to be added to git ignore, is it interacting with the git?
So you have to add it manually to git ignore, because presumably you don't want the second file to get in the repository, because with that there would be no point of having the second file. You could just have the same approach for the first file. So yeah, so this will have to be manually distributed for developers that need this. So if the majority of developers, say 80%, are using XAMPP or on Windows directly with no Docker, then this is what you put in the main configuration file. Or actually, in this case, you wouldn't put anything, just commands directly with no additional configuration. And for people using Docker, you would have the second file saying that, okay, so for this first file, we are adding the Docker support. So whatever is run, it's run from inside the Docker container. Okay, one more question.
Thank you. Just out of the curiosity, what is the pre-commit action that launches the check?
So the pre-commit is when you already have your code ready for the commit, so you added this, and now you are typing git commit -m, your message there. And when you hit enter, then first thing that will get executed is the pre-commit hook. Sure. So if we have failed checks, like for example, the code is really bad, it's not up to our standards, then the commit won't be made at all.
Okay, cool, thank you.
And it's the same, for example, for the, how was the name of this? The message hook. So basically, usually in my experience, when we have some projects, we usually put the Jira ticket name in the commit message. So with the corresponding Git hook, you can check if that part of the message is there. If it's not, sorry, no commit for you. So on Gram.php, this is pre-configured. So for example, if you configure a PHP CS code sniffer, then it will only get the delta, the new code that is ready to be committed, because that's how it got pre-configured. And on Captain Hook, you have some variables that you have to add yourself. So presumably you will also want to run this on the delta, but maybe not in every case. Maybe with every commit, you actually want to check entire project. So it's up to you. So this is more configurable. Less pre-configured, but more configurable manually, Captain Hook.
Mm-hmm. Well, like follow-up question to the previous one, when there's an option to override the local execution. I saw on one of those tools there's a local environment variable used. Can it be somehow? I know it might be possible to read in the documentation, but I'm asking towards execution of those and using of those tools in the continuous integration container or something like that. Can you override this particular variable by the local variable on your environment? Did you play with it? Or?
So in Gram.php, no. So you will have to do some manual replacement on the file before this is actually executed in CI/CD. It's simpler in Captain Hook because you can, also manually add the second configuration file only for CI/CD.
Yeah, but the local environments are not available to be read from the config, right? It's not.
Could you repeat, sorry?
The environment variables are not possible to be read by the config, right?
No, it's
okay.
only
it's
what's
only by
in there.
File by file, okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any more questions? Then thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you all. I think we had really amazing lineup of speakers and topics. So that's how we close this year, the last meetup of 2023. I will do my best to coordinate meetups in the next year. As I said before, I'm not sure about the location, what venue we will find for that, but there are a couple ideas, so definitely we'll find something. Not sure if it'll be January or early February, we'll see. And as you can imagine, there is one important thing we need to organize a meetup. Meetup is not only about food and drink, so please send your ideas for your topics. If you want to share something interesting, it doesn't have to be 30 minutes. You may even have something to share for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It may be a different format. Just submit whatever you think may be interesting to share with others. This is how the meetup will be something interesting, and we can just continue this tradition. So thank you very much. Today we are not closing this place yet, so if you want to continue discussions, feel free to stay here. Thank you for all who were watching us on the live stream, and thanks again to all partners, especially to Hyvä, who supported our stream and makes us happy, also makes e-commerce happy. Thanks Centuria for food and drinks, and Snowdog for coordinating. So my team, thanks a lot. Okay, so thank you very much. It was great to host you here, and it was really nice to see an international audience today, and some of you coming especially for this event from pretty far. So thank you very much. Okay.